Nice weather we're having.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Well, guess what? You are blessed. We have a bonus interview that I'm sure that you're going to enjoy. We have author. He's an author. That's one of the things that he is, and director of Wildcard Strategy, which is a strategic planning and risk management consultancy. We have Jim McComb here, and his book, Certain Success in an Uncertain World, Surviving and Thriving in a Disruptive Future. Wow, that is a heavy title, Jim. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalind.
I thank you for being here. So, um, you you were sharing some data with me that made my eyes pop. You were saying that you in Inc. magazine that 96% of today's businesses will be gone in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, and that a prominent business school says that 40% of the Fortune 500 companies will be gone by 2025.
Right.
Wow, my hair stood on end.
Now, they actually made that prediction 5 years ago, so it was over a 10-year span of time, but it still is 40% of the Fortune 500 5 years ago would be gone in 10 years.
So, talk a little bit about the dynamics that are causing that.
Well, there actually are a lot of reasons, and some of the reasons that have always caused businesses to close are they're run by families, and eventually the family members that had the passion for the business want to retire, and the son or the daughter says, I'd rather be a coach like Rosalind. I don't want to run this business. So that's a reason they close. Sometimes the business winds up being the owner's retirement. So they want to sell it because they need the money to retire. But there are also instances where the business either fails, or a business that I once worked for, Countrywide, doesn't fail, but is forced to sell because sooner or later they will be in financial trouble if they don't. So I think your question, Rosalind, is probably most appropriate for those businesses. And what happens to those businesses is they essentially don't see change coming. When it does come, they're unprepared for it. And what my book talks about with wild cards is wild cards are change that essentially occurs just like that. It's gradual change, which is what most of us are used to in our lives. Aging is one of those changes I'm having to deal with right now, and thank goodness it happens gradually. But a lot of change in business doesn't, and businesses don't see it coming, and all of a sudden they wind up literally doing work that's obsolete, or their customer base moves on to someone else for some reason or another, or a law is enacted that literally puts them out of business. A rumor on social media can they didn't see coming. And there are a lot of businesses that just don't, and in some cases, good things are happening to them, but they don't see the potential. For example, not a lot of folks realize that Kodak actually invented the digital camera. They never saw the potential in it, and the patent eventually expired, and others got a hold of the technology. And we've all heard of Kodak today, but when was the last time you used a Kodak product? Probably not.
Right. So would Blockbuster, remember, I don't know if you remember the company Blockbuster that
Sure.
rent out videos, and would they be an example perhaps of a wild card that put them out of business? The fact that they weren't, it seems, reading the times correctly. They think that they can continue just to rent out videos forever.
Well,
And
Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and others who
mhm,
their space, what they didn't see coming was Netflix. And thank goodness for Netflix, Netflix saw Netflix coming because even within their own company, their technology changed just, well, got to make sure I'm on camera, changed just like that. In that, you might remember if you were a Netflix customer eons ago, like I was, you kind of mailed DVDs back and forth. And I mean, it was better than going to the video store, it was more convenient, but there still was another way. And that's what Netflix, in fact, is doing today. And then Netflix also branched out into programming because they saw the whole Hulu thing coming. And so Netflix is still surviving today, where they could be out of business as well if they hadn't continually adapted to what the next trend in entertainment
mhm.
is going to be. So,
And so for the small business owner, what kind of threats are there to our businesses? What do we need to protect ourselves from so that we can have some longevity in our business?
well, I'll tell you the 7 sources of wildcards.
Okay.
And I'll be a little slow here so people can jot them down, but it's generally 1 or 2 words, so it's not going to be a big thing. But the 7 are socio-demographic trends. How are people changing? How is the face of America changing? The next one is competitors, and not just what we call conventional competitors, but non-conventional competitors. For example, recently, Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, and Jamie Dimon, who heads up Chase Bank, and Warren Buffett, who we all know as an investor, the 3 of them announced a partnership where they're getting into healthcare.
Mm,
What do a banker and, Amazon originally started out selling books. So you got a banker, a bookseller, and an investor who just buys and sells companies. What do they know about healthcare? Not as much as people who are in healthcare, obviously, but now they're going to become a major competitor to the hospital chain. So competitors is one. The economy. Don't really need to say much about that. People pretty much, I think, get that the economy is a source. The next is a very important one that not a lot of people think about, and it's the political environment, which includes legal, meaning court cases, court decisions. Very important for business people to pay attention to what's going on in the courts because often they impact the future of businesses. And then obviously legislative, the people who make the laws at the state and federal level, and regulatory, which are the folks who make the laws at the state and federal level but aren't elected by us. They just
mm,
probably of all of those, they have the greatest impact on business. Uh, the next is technology. So that would be the 4th or the 5th. The 6th is what we call industry customs. And the best way I can illustrate that is when the way industries do business change dramatically. I mentioned I worked for Countrywide. Well, back before the meltdown, uh, it used to be hard to get a loan beyond 30 years. And then all of a sudden, in a battle for market share, 3 subprime lenders, of which Countrywide was one, began offering loans that stretched out as long as 50 years,
oh, wow.
which was a whole different concept in the industry. And it threw several lenders for a curve and caused their business models to just go upside down again, literally overnight. And then the last C is perhaps the most important of all, and that's changing consumer attitudes, opinions, and preferences. And I'll say that again because it's 5 words, I guess. changing consumer attitudes, opinions, and preferences. So that is, how are people thinking differently today than they were yesterday? And
Mm, mm,
what makes that the most important is that businesses who truly are on the cutting edge, and this can be any small business run by anyone who's on the call today. If you want to tap into that, you can do the same thing that, well, I would cite Apple as being the industry leader in this, because what they do is they bring in focus groups and they don't ask people about Apple products. They don't say, what kind of computer, do you wish you had? They ask people about their lives in general and how they want their lives to be different in the future. What do you wish? What's a way you wish you could live today that you can't for some reason or another? And they listen to that. And frankly, everyone on this call can ask their own customers the same thing. And don't think just about the product or service you sell.
mhm.
In the end, what you really are selling is a better life for those that you've identified as your target market, a certain age range, or people with kids, or whatever demographic you have been on. But you ask them not about the product, but about their lives. And the more you know about how they want those lives to be, you can start thinking. Because the other great thing to say here about Wildcards that I forgot to say earlier, they're not all negative.
Mhm,
Cards can
mhm.
be positive too, and they can be opportunities that are floating around out there. But if you haven't anticipated them, they just float right on by you and they bless someone else who
Yes, yes.
was watching for them or anticipating. Um, so, probably a longer answer than you wanted, Rosa.
No, no, no. That's perfect. So. It sounds like a lot of additional responsibility put on the shoulders of an entrepreneur who's just trying to keep their head above water and operate all facets of their business. Now I have to be able to add this way of thinking, which is important to my stress load. So that is what I'm thinking. But what are some signals that typically point to a imminent appearance of a wild card? You're a small business person, and what are some things that we can just kind of just assess and see quickly as we're running our business?
Can I be a politician here and tell you? I'll answer that in a moment. But what I really like to do is answer the question you just asked, but didn't realize you asked.
Sure, sure.
Mary is a small business person. How do I get a handle on this whole wild card thing?
Yeah.
Three things you need to do, and they're easy. Join the trade association that represents whatever industry it is that you're in. And you want to do that because every trade association publishes a monthly newsletter. And in that newsletter, they tell you about what's going on in the back halls of Congress that maybe isn't being talked about in the news yet, or what new inventions are on the horizon in your industry that maybe aren't being talked about. I know the insider stuff that you can read in 15 minutes a month and feel like you kind of know what's ahead. Then you want to join an organization called the World Future Society. It's cheap. It only costs about $50 a year, but they have great publications and a bunch of people sitting around with, crystal ball kind of stuff. This is an organization that scientists, economists, sociologists, those kind of people are in, people who have their eye on various aspects of the future. And again, once a month, 15, 20 minutes, you can find out what these people are discovering. And then the third thing, write down the name Peter, Peter, Diamandis, Diamandis, Andis. He publishes a free newsletter every month called the Abundance Insider. And if you just Google him, you can find out how to email him and say, hey, Peter, I heard about your great newsletter. Can you put me on the mailing list? It's absolutely free. And this guy runs what's called Singularity University. It's based in Silicon Valley, but this is where the nation's foremost futurists and thinkers gather. And this Abundance Insider newsletter will tell you things you won't even believe are going on in the world and give you some insight about where your business might be going. So I just wanted to get those things in because that is a way a small business person can get a lot of great knowledge for not a lot of money and in a short period of time. You can just spend a couple hours a month reading and
Love it.
you know great things.
Thank you, Jim, because now I feel a lot less stressed about that. But that's important information. It surely is. So
now to get to your question about the signals, we
yes,
mentioned a couple of them. Laws, whenever laws change or are in the process of changing that have anything to do with your industry, and again, your trade association can kind of keep you up to date on that. You don't have to necessarily do that on your own. Inventions, and Peter will tell you about inventions. Anyone out there who's watched Star Trek, if you ever thought "Beam me up, Scotty" would never occur in your lifetime, you would be wrong because technology has already been discovered. And you would learn about that if you were getting Peter's newsletter. Discoveries, research advances, again, those things are going to be in the World Future Society and also in Peter's newsletter and other places. You can just Google, futurist or Google wildcard and, see what comes up. Rapidly changing public opinion. When you see public opinion begin to shift very quickly. We've seen that recently with the death of George Floyd.
mm-hmm.
That was a wild card.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
We should have seen it coming. There was a gentleman by the name of Eric Garner that had a very similar thing happen to him a few years ago, but it happened. So when something like that occurs that literally shifts public opinion, and it does affect businesses, Aunt Jemima and Mrs. Butterworth changing the names of their products now. And you might say, well, what does that have to do with George Floyd? Well, that was something that grew out of that event.
Exactly.
Not always something that is directly tied to an event or directly tied to an invention, but you just kind of let your mind wander a little bit and think, okay, what are the longer term consequences or results of something that occurs or something that's invented or a law that is changed? And it doesn't always have to be a law. I mean, if you were employed on the Keystone Pipeline, you found out in short order that, a presidential executive action can put you out of work literally in 24 hours, which is what it did.
Yes, yes.
So those are some things. I mentioned court rulings earlier. That's another example. And well, that's probably, I think, a good answer to your question.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. I want to talk a little bit for these next few minutes before we wrap up about your upcoming book, Certain Success in an Uncertain World. Where are you in the writing process?
Well, I am in the pretty much completed process. So, from there it goes to publishing. And if you've ever written a book, and I believe you've written 3, if I'm not mistaken, you know that process sometimes goes along a little more slowly than the author would prefer.
Yes.
But I'm hoping to have that out before the year is over. But what it talks about essentially is the process of how to forecast a wild card and then how to prepare for it once you've forecasted one that's plausible and will have a significant impact on your business. So
And
there,
Jim, I'm kind of doing this a little bit backwards. But what got you even interested in the topic of wild cards?
well, when I worked at Countrywide, I was head of strategic planning. And so we were tasked with essentially doing a nonstop strategic foresight to help steer a Fortune 75 company. It was a huge company. And what we discovered during a scenario planning process in 2004 was that the United States was headed for a financial meltdown.
Mm,
And we discovered that during a process that we essentially built during a strategic planning session because we felt, if anyone on the call has done traditional strategic planning, it has a SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to your company. You have control over those. Opportunities and threats, external. You don't have control over those. But the thing is, when you're planning, more often than not, the things that come up in that discussion are things that at least one or two people, if not more, around the table know about because they heard a speaker talk about it, or they read about it in the media, or they saw it maybe in a forum on social media or something, but or their trade associations talking about it.
mhm.
Bottom line is they're all things that at least someone at the table knows is coming. Wild cards are a form of risk management. And so when I was at Countrywide, I was also responsible for risk management planning as well as strategic planning. And we decided to take this process and make it more formalized so that it could be used to minimize risk in our business and certainly any other business as well. And the process worked so well that we predicted the financial meltdown 4 years later within a week of when it would happen.
Wow.
And at the same time in 2004, we predicted that. We also predicted the sale of Countrywide, which our CEO at the time, who was the founder of the company, didn't think would happen.
Mm, mm.
And then, in fact, he told me directly, "You don't know our business." Okay. That's just what we came up with. And the process I outline in the book is essentially the process we went through to first brainstorm and then determine the plausibility and the impact, and then to prioritize what are the ones we really should be looking at out of the list we came up with, and then how do we prepare? What do we do today? Which a little tip I have for small business people who go through this process is I understand the day-to-day thing because I have two businesses and it's difficult. But what you try to do is you break the strategic part of what you need to do for your business down into little bite-sized pieces. One thing that might take you 15 minutes to do, okay, I'm going to put that down for this week. And I'm literally going to put it on my to-do list. It's going to go on my calendar. It's just going to be one of the things that I do. And, it's slow going when you do that, but you move the needle, to borrow kind of a worn out phrase. You move the needle. And so in the end, you do wind up prepared. You're not,
Mhm.
well, this weekend, I'm going to have some time on Saturday, so I'll sit down then and do it. And then something happens and you don't do it. And time goes by. I mean, someday you wake up and you realize you're as old as I am today, and you go, "Where did life go?"
Yeah,
I wanted to do this and this and this and this, and now I'm out of time. So that's
yeah.
how I got interested in it, and it is so critical to the future of any business, not only mitigating the negative wild cards, but leveraging the positive ones. And even if you don't want to be in business forever, let's say you own a business today and it's your retirement. Okay. But the better you make that business until you retire, the more money you're going to get paid when you sell it. So,
Absolutely. I'm looking at the time. We're running out of time. So
okay.
now, do you work with individuals or do you work with large companies? Who do you work with?
Yes. Anyone. And the importance of that question is something I forgot to mention, and that is this process can be used not only by small business, medium business, Fortune 100 business, individual people use it too for their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Cards are ahead of me, what opportunities are ahead of me. And the process will work for an individual person, it'll work for a small business, it'll work for a big business. And
Wow. If someone wants to get in contact with you, Jim, how can they do
sure,
that?
you can either reach me by phone. My cell number is 909 374 4738. I do have an office number, but the cell is with me at all times, so that's better. Or you can email me at Jim McComb, and that's all one word, no spaces or anything. JIMMCC. It's two C's. If you only use one, it won't get to me. OMB at wildcardstrategy.com, and that also is one word.
Oh,
So
excellent, excellent. Wow, you have given our audience so much to think about. I mean, this is really a rich conversation. I'm looking forward to the book coming out, to read it. I know you're a great author. You know, I know you have how many books yourself? You've written three?
actually six, but five
Oh my.
five of them are now out of print. They were business books that I wrote in the 90s. And I currently have one book on Amazon called Undiscovered Horizons. So,
Beautiful, beautiful. And so I want to thank you very much again for being here and blessing our audience. And audience, I know that you're going to, as I always say, you're going to run. You're not going to walk, you're going to run to Jim to see what his offerings are and how he can help you. And this, until then, I want you guys to have a really fantastic weekend. Until next time, everyone, peace and blessings. Bye bye for now.
thank you.